Imagine spending millions to build a lakeside paradise. Cabins gleaming in the morning sun, decks stretching over glassy water, and brochures everywhere selling dreams of escape. Only to watch the whole thing start sinking into mud before a single guest sets foot inside. That's exactly what happened in Jefferson County, Tennessee. And if you've ever wondered what happens when unstoppable ambition meets immovable history, buckle up, because this one's personal. I was there when the first cracks showed, when silence settled over the new cabins like a shroud, and when the whole town realized maybe, just maybe, one stubborn man could change everything. It started with Karina Duval. She swept into our little county in a slick black SUV, investors riding shotgun, and a plan to turn our patch of wilderness into the next big vacation hotspot. On paper, she was perfect. Sharp suit, polished shoes, that relentless smile people from cities have when they think they're doing you a favor by paving over what you've always loved. She stood up at the community center and promised progress, money, jobs. This lake, she said, is untapped potential. Families will flock here, couples will find peace, and this town will never be the same. Folks clapped, sort of, but most of us looked to the back of the room, where Raymond Holt sat arms crossed, quiet as ever. He'd seen more sunrises on that lake than the rest of us combined. Raymond's family had built the dam decades back, not for profit, but to keep the water and the land in balance. He spent 40 years as a park ranger, looked like he'd grown out of the earth itself, calloused hands, broad shoulders a little stooped, always scanning the horizon like he expected the mountains to up and walk away one day. For Raymond, the lake wasn't just water. It was memory, responsibility, and something you never took for granted. "You're talking about potential," he said to Karina that first night, voice low but carrying. "But you don't know this water. You don't know what it takes to keep it steady." Karina just smiled, thanked him for his passion, and told the room that progress couldn't be stopped. Yeah, that happened. To her, progress meant cabins, 139 of them, lined up shoulder to shoulder along the marshy edge of Cherokee Lake, each one a promise to her investors and a threat to everything Raymond held dear. But here's the part you don't read in the brochures. That lake's edge is marsh, unpredictable, a sponge that'll swallow up whatever you try to pin to it. You can plant reeds, maybe set a fishing dock if you're lucky, but build a wall of cabins, and it's just a matter of time before the ground gets the last word. Still, the bulldozers rolled in. Week after week, frames went up, the sound of hammers replacing birdsong and the slap of water. Raymond walked the shoreline every evening, muttering about balance, about what his father always said. The lake gives, but it also takes. Every warning Raymond gave, Karina ignored. She wasn't mean, just dismissive, the way people get when they think money makes them right. Once, after he tried calling her one last time, she cut him off. "Business is business, Mr. Holt. We'll manage the risk." He hung up, knowing what she didn't. You don't manage nature, you respect it, or it'll remind you who's really in charge. That spring, you could feel the tension across Jefferson County. People needed jobs, sure. Some folks thought Karina's project would finally bring money, keep their kids from leaving town. Others, old-timers mostly, sat on porches at dusk, watching the horizon and muttering that nothing good ever came easy. At the diner, over coffee and pie, it became the only thing anyone wanted to argue about. Every time Raymond spoke up, half the town nodded along. The other half rolled their eyes and asked when he'd stop living in the past. But it wasn't just arguments. People who'd known each other since grade school now avoided each other at the grocery store. Neighbors turned cold. I saw it firsthand. Families split over the promise of quick money versus the risk of losing the only thing that made this place special. And every time someone wavered, Karina had another answer. Engineering reports, glossy pamphlets, environmental studies no one ever actually read. She hosted luncheons at the diner, promised locals discount rates, smiled for the newspaper in front of half-built cabins. She looked unstoppable, but Raymond wasn't finished. He cornered neighbors at the gas station. Earl Mathis, who'd signed on to haul gravel for the build. "You know that shoreline won't hold, Earl. You fish there same as me." Earl just shook his head. "I hear you, Ray, but I got bills. Short money now, long loss later. You know what I mean?" As summer rolled in, the warning signs started piling up. The lake was lower than usual, fish floating belly up where runoff had poisoned the shore. The herons that usually returned didn't. Raymond brought it to the county commission, stood up in front of the board, and said, "You're building on wetlands. You ignored every soil study, every warning. If you don't stop this, nature will." The chairperson barely looked up from his papers. "We trust the professionals, Mr. Holt." Karina flashed that practiced smile, and Raymond left shaking his head. By late summer, the cabin stood finished, decks hanging over water so low it barely lapped at the pilings. The first tourists started booking, the town started to hope. But locals could see it. The ground was cracked, mud sucked at your boots, the cabins leaned just a hair off straight. One night after a heavy rain, the first real sign came. A cabin on the end shifted, the stilts snapped, and the whole structure lurched into the muck. Workers scrambled, investors called in a panic, but Karina just promised more reinforcements, more concrete, as if you could patch a sinking boat with duct tape. Raymond knew what was coming. He told Earl, "I'm thinking about balance, about why my family built that dam. Not for someone else's profit." Earl paled. "Ray, you wouldn't." But Raymond didn't answer. He just walked back toward his truck, face set like stone. Then the storm hit. Rain poured for 20 hours straight. Raymond stood at the dam in his raincoat, watching water pound against the gates, mud churning. By dawn, a half-dozen cabins were listing, their decks tilting, the ground beneath turning to soup. Karina sped out in her SUV, barking orders, investors blowing up her phone, workers slamming sandbags under foundations. She caught sight of Raymond and stormed over. "Are you enjoying this?" she spat. He just shook his head. "I warned you. I begged you to listen. Now the lake's showing you what happens when you push too far." She insisted they'd reinforce, stabilize. He answered, "You can't reinforce against greed. The ground doesn't care about your profits." Then, as if on cue, a crack split the air, one cabin collapsed with a groan, half the structure plunging into mud. That night, Raymond sat at his kitchen table, lamp burning low, memories crowding in, his father's hand on the dam crank, his wife teasing him about talking to the lake like it was a person. The decision that had been growing in him finally solidified. Courts wouldn't move fast enough. Nature didn't wait for hearings. It was time for action, for someone to take the risk nobody else would. So that night, under a cold silver moon, Raymond walked out to the dam. He placed his lantern on the railing, gripped the iron wheel, and strained until the gates finally moved, groaning, rumbling, until water surged through, pulling weeds, mud, and branches with it. By sunrise, the lake had dropped several feet, marshland swallowing the cabin's stilts, decks hanging over nothing but cracked earth. Workers arrived in shock. Karina showed up livid, her voice breaking as she screamed, "What did you do?" Raymond looked her in the eye, calm as always. "I gave it back." Word traveled fast. The headline in the Jefferson Chronicle read, "Developer's dream sinks as lake drains overnight." And before long, reporters rolled in from Knoxville, Atlanta, everywhere. The sheriff showed up, an old friend of Raymond's. "Ray, did you open those gates?" Raymond didn't flinch. "Yes." The sheriff sighed, cuffed him, and hauled him to county jail. Outside, half the town cheered, half jeered. At the diner, friends became strangers. Some called him a hero, others a thief who stole their kids' future. Lawsuits flew, tempers flared, but the lake, finally, was breathing again. Herons returned, the marsh started to heal, and those who'd watched it all unfold realized maybe the land had gotten the last word after all. Karina's empire cracked right along with the cabins. Investors turned, the website advertising lakeshore cabins went dark, and her name became a warning, not a promise. Raymond was released on bail, and some neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. Others shook his hand and said, quietly, "Thank you." The cabins stood empty, half collapsed, a landmark to stubbornness and the lesson that nature always wins in the end. One night, a local boy, Travis, came by with a notebook. "I gotta write an essay about someone I admire, Mr. Holt. I want to write about you." Raymond just chuckled. "Son, I'm no hero. I just did what needed doing. But maybe that's what heroes are, just the last one standing when everyone else gives up. And that's where it ends, or maybe where it begins." Jefferson County never went back to how it was. Some families left, others stayed. Arguments faded. The marsh returned. The fish came back, and the story of the man who opened the dam turned into something folks would argue about for years. Some say Raymond ruined the future, others say he saved it. But the one thing no one denies, the land itself is still here, breathing, and teaching us all the cost of forgetting what holds us up. So let me ask you, when it comes down to it, would you risk everything for balance? Or would you chase profit and hope for the best? Because one lasts a season, and the other, well, the other lasts a lifetime. If this story makes you think, if it stirs something in you about justice, community, or what we owe to the places we call home, drop your thoughts below. Where do you stand? Who was right? Who was wrong? And what does justice look like in your own backyard?